Hello, welcome to Drop Stitches Podcast. I am Sapphire Child, also known as Julia. You can find me on Ravelry as Sapphire Child or on Instagram as julia.redman, Redman. Welcome. Today is May 21st, Sunday in the afternoon. And if you're coming for the first time, welcome to my crazy time. If you're returning, thanks for joining me. Why are you joining me? Well, anyway, it's been a while since I last recorded, and in that time I've been to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival and also very briefly to the New Hampshire Sheep and Wool Festival. There's been some visiting of family and various catching up at work, and now that it's finally showing some signs of actual life and spring here in New Hampshire, there's been a bit of yard work too, so it's kind of been hard for me to make myself sit down and record, but I don't want you to feel like I forgot you. I love you all, I think. Anyway, welcome. So today I'm gonna go briefly over some finished objects and some of my stash enhancement from the last couple of weeks, but not all of it because it is a shameful amount. And I'm too lazy to pull out a plant today, so there will be no plant. So possibly a short episode. So there will be minimum torture for you today. Good? Okay. I'm not drinking anything exciting today, but I'll tell you what I have. It's tea. It's an Assam tea with some fennel seeds and black pepper and a little bit of cumin seeds mixed in, plus a squirt of lemon. I had a brief cold. Also, it's been a busy couple of weeks, or a month, I guess. And still kind of becoming normal again, or as normal as I ever become. So since that's all there is to that, let's move into some finished objects. So I'm wearing, let me kind of stand up a little bit. Ta-da! I'm wearing my Huevos shawl, which is a design by Carol Feller. And I've knit this in, hang on a second, let me bring up the record. Handmade in Fine Yard, camel spun, something like that. This took almost no yarn, by the way, because of course, let's have another shot at it. It's all holes, so there's really no substance to this sweater. You could probably do this with a single skein of sock yarn. I haven't actually weighed my leftovers, but I would be surprised. I had 2 skeins, which I was alternating throughout. They were very different. Here, one moment. I'm just going to reach behind you here and grab those. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, sorry, whoops. It's a roller coaster today. Alright, here's what's left. You'll notice that looks like a lot, doesn't it? I can't remember how big these skeins are, but they're, can you tell on that camera? One is a little more browny purple and the other one's a bit more hot pink, and ostensibly they are the same colorway, but same colorway or not, different dye lots, different day, can come out quite different, and they are quite different. But by alternating them throughout, you can't tell at all. It just looks cohesive. And the way I did that, I'm trying to remember if I did every row or every other row. Probably every other row, but in any case. So if you've never done that before, it's real easy to do, especially when you're just knitting on the tube portion or across the flat like you might do on something like that, where you just carry the the one strand up the side and pick it up. You don't cut it or anything like that. So don't think that doing that means that you're going to run into a lot of ends, because you really don't. That said, it does get a little more complex on something like this because of the way on the side, you're starting out by knitting 2 separate pieces, so you do have extra ends because you're going to want to alternate on that section as well. And then when you get up to the top, then there's short row shaping up here, and there's a lot going on. And then for the straps, at that point, it's who cares. So that wasn't alternated, but everything else was. So that adds a little bit to it, but it's not really that big a deal in the scheme of things. It's just a matter of managing where you are and which strand you're going to next. Let's see, did I modify this? I think the most major modification I made to it was for gauge. So my gauge was a little bit looser. She actually in the pattern calls for a double yarn over, which I wasn't going to do. That sounded too fussy to me, but my gauge is sufficiently relaxed that I don't think that would have been necessary anyway. She was probably knitting it with a much more snug gauge and much more snug yarn overs, and so that would have given it that holiness by doing the double yarn over. And you drop one loop. So I just did a regular yarn over. And yeah, so I modified by gauge by taking out 1 or 2 repeats, something like this, from the smallest size. And I might have done my decreases a little bit differently. And I knit the back of it just a tiny bit wider, just a few stitches. I think I did the short row shaping. I can't remember, but I think I did the top shaping a tiny bit differently than the way she had described it, because I didn't like how it was coming out. Yeah, I did, but I can't for the life of me remember exactly what I did. Sorry. So I wanted it to have more of a, okay, the obvious thing is, I know how we can do this. I wanted it to have more of a tank top shape. And the actual pattern is not that. It's more of a keyhole shape. Here we go, on her lovely model. I think that's her sister-in-law. And so I didn't really favor that. And so I did just short rows back and forth, and then on one side, and then across, and back and forth again. Making them a little shorter each time to make this scoop shape to it. And that's where it becomes a little bit annoying to alternate between strands, because you're going across with one strand and then you have to take the end from the other end of the ball, so you don't have to cut over here, to continue the alternating colors through this little section, and then you back across with the one strand and so on. Anyway, hopefully that was somewhat coherent. But realistically not a big modification. And that was probably the most complex modification that I did, because even though, like I mentioned, that I made it a little bit, I had fewer stitches to accommodate for my gauge difference, in the end, the shaping is A-line on this sweater, so it doesn't really impact how you do your decreases at all. The overall effect is still pretty similar. So what else can I say about this? So I blocked it on the mannequin here just because I didn't feel like wiring it. And that worked out pretty well. It was a little bit of a risk because the mannequin is actually bigger than I am. But that's okay. I wanted it to be a little bit drapey and less clingy, so that helps with that as well. And I didn't have to pin it at all. I just kind of yanked it down over the mannequin, so that worked. And then the other thing I can say about it is I had a little bit of difficulty figuring out how to wear it. So I put it on with one tank top and I hated it. Just a plain black one with like spaghetti straps, similar to the one I'm wearing now, but it had a higher collar, and I wasn't friends with that. So then I tried it with a, regular kind of tank top with the thicker straps and a little bit higher here, but those are also higher in the back. And this is, can you see, not high in the back. And so when I put that on, I just thought, I just look ridiculous. I look trashy. More trashy than I can take. So that didn't work. And so then I tried it with this other tank top, which is, meant to go under a blouse. It's got some, I don't know about this lace thing going on here, but it's not that bad. It works, I think. It's okay. Yeah, that's enough of that. I'm just kind of disappointed that it doesn't smell like silk, but anyway, what should I do with all of this? There's enough here, I think, to do a shawl. I should weigh the finished sweater. I would bet you that it can't be more than 100 grams. So, something to do with some random sock yarn that you have laying around, especially something that might be drapey. And yeah, so this is a camel silk blend, so it does have some wool in it, and but because of all the holes, I can't imagine it's really going to hold in much heat. The original pattern was meant for linen, so you do want something that'll be able to drapey, in my opinion. Let's see, what else do we have? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, on the mannequin behind me, there is a cowl. Now, I started that while I was away at Maryland Sheep and Wool. I just took that with me. It's a skein of handspun, and the fiber was from Alley Cat Fiber Arts. You see that it's merino, and there's her contact info there. So I spun this last year. It's, please hold. I think it's a 3-ply. Yes. So I did that as Navajo ply, and I was really quite pleased with how the skein turned out rather. It was a really bouncy skein. It was one of those serendipitous moments where I really wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, but I still managed to come out with a skein of merino that just had this pillowy bounce action to it, which I love. I'm always pleased with that kind of thing. But interestingly, the fiber was really pretty, but it didn't really look very pretty in the skein. So for a while I was kind of, what am I gonna do with this? And recently, so a few things. Sometimes handspun from really fun fiber can be hard to work with just because of the fact that it tends to have a lot going on. And I don't know about you, but for me, I don't like to use busy yarns for busy patterns. Because of the fact that I think when you look at such a thing, all you see is the color. It's hard to see the structure of the item underneath, particularly lace. But this particular pattern is actually very simple. I mean, it does have some lace holes on it, but the way that they're arranged is a very architectural looking pattern. Right? It's also very easy to memorize and very quick to do. So let's see, what is the pattern? Maybe that would be useful information for you. I have it here. It is called what Alice found. And it's free. Yeah, it's free on Ravelry by Kelly Judson. And she has 2 sizes for it, but basically a cowl, which is this size. Honestly, I don't know if my gauge is what she recommended, but yeah, it works. It's fine, right? That's passable. And then she has a larger one for if you want to do an infinity and loop around. So that was my carrying around and knitting at Starbucks and also at home for a little while. So it didn't take very long to finish. I would recommend a pattern like this for a skein of something that you don't really know what to do with. This yarn's probably about a DK weight, maybe. I didn't really mark it. Might be a little more than a DK weight. It is very puffy. It only grew a tiny bit when I washed it. I wasn't sure it was going to at all because of the fact that the yarn was so bouncy, but it did, and that's good because I think it makes the lace a little more obvious. So I'll probably be gifting that. Pleased with it. All right. What else? Oh, I have this. You've seen this before. Oh, all right. Before I go on. No, I'll save that for later. Sorry. Let's go on to this. Baby blanket. This is the Leaping Stripes and Blocks baby blanket. And it's in just an acrylic yarn because I happen to believe that baby blankets should be easily washable. So by Tamara Kelly. And it is a free pattern, and it's by link to her blog, and that the blog is Moogly. That's what it looks like to me. Anyway, this is also something that is, the last time I showed this, I was talking about using your stitch pattern dictionary as a way to come up with blanket patterns. And that's kind of what's going on here. But seeing it in a pattern is always useful because you can see how someone has managed their color, and it gets you a little step further than a stitch dictionary, doesn't it? Now, I'm not sure what border she did on hers, but for mine, what I did was a row of single crochet followed by a row of reverse single crochet, which I believe is also called crab stitch. But although I've said that to you before, I was recently looking to see where I came up with that name, and I don't know out of what stitch dictionary I found that name. So crab stitch might be something else. It's what I call crab stitch. Is that good enough? All right, so that's one more baby blanket down. And if we move on now to, let's see, how much yarn was this? This was the, I think they're 5-ounce skeins. And I had one full of each of the colors and then one partial of each of the colors, but I haven't weighed them yet, so let's say 1.5 of each color. So there's a bit left over if you want to do an animal or some other thing or a slightly bigger blanket. And this is approximately a 32-inch size, roughly. Anyway, it's a reasonably quick knit. It could have been done sooner if I'd actually focused on it, but I hadn't. Quick crochet, sorry. So that'll be going to a friend's baby. They're having twins, and so I've also started the second, and they're having one of each. So the second is the Ocean Waves Baby Afghan, which is a Lion brand pattern, and it is essentially just a shell. a shell stitch pattern. And I'm using this same yarn for this. Since I'm pulling this out, again, cheap yarn. And, oh sorry, 6 ounce skeins. Whatever, close enough. You need to buy 2 of each. And let me hold on to the loop so I don't lose it. We got about that far. So that's a little over a foot in height so far. So let's say it's approximately a third done. And I'll have one more to do after this. Or I'm going to have to do, you know, a hat and booties kind of a thing. Because everyone seems to be having babies this year. Anyway. You know, for acrylic, it's not bad. It's shiny, it's soft, it washes easily. It's everything you could want in a baby blanket. Alright, in my highly stylish grocery bag. The Common Market, by the way, is a place in Frederick, Maryland that we think is the best grocery store ever. Also working on, all right. I'm getting back into doing some spinning. So Tour de Fleece is coming up, and I am sometimes a prolific spinner, and then sometimes I don't touch it for months. And I've recently been through a patch where I really just didn't touch any of my spinning wheels for months. And this is significant given that I have many spinning wheels at this point. And although I have a respectable amount of yarn, it's not really a whole lot in the scheme of things. I have a lot of fiber, a lot. And I really need to see to that. I don't know, I just find fiber so much more attractive, so much more exciting, because it can be anything. When you buy a fleece, it can be anything. When you buy it, and usually several somethings, because a fleece is, depending upon the breed, anywhere from, say, 2 pounds to 10 pounds raw. And once washed, although with some breeds you can lose up to 40% of the weight in the washing and so on, that's still a lot of fiber. You know, any one fleece could be a couple of sweaters and several hats and a few pairs of socks and a house cozy. I don't know. With the amount of stuff that I have, I probably could knit a house cozy. It's that shameful. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So Tour de Fleece is coming up, and if you haven't done this before, this is a kind of a spinning event where we spin on our spinning wheels along with the Tour de France. People often set goals for themselves, and sometimes the goals are very simple, like spin every day that the tour is running, and that could be as little as, you know, spin for 15 minutes or spin for 30 minutes or what have you. Sometimes the goals are more complex, like wash and process and spin an entire fleece, or work on spinning only on your spindles, or work on spinning very fine, or work on spinning coils, something, anything. And sometimes the goals are more, I want to get through this fiber, like I've bought a bunch of bats from Joanna of Knit Spin Farm, and maybe I want to get through all of those bats during Tour de Fleece, which is totally doable, by the way, in that case, but not all of my fiber. Anyway, so I do like doing Tour de Fleece. It is always a useful thing if I've gone through a period like I recently have, where I just haven't spun. It's just a reason to get excited about it and push myself to get back into the habit of spinning a lot. It can be very effective. So it's kind of a social event, or it can be a social event, or it can be a by yourself event. There are assorted groups on Ravelry that have teams, and you can participate. They sometimes have prizes or themes. And I mentioned Joanna because of the fact that she is hosting a team this year. And, it will be for people who are spinning her fiber, I believe. And so I'm going to support her. I'm going to be on that team. I'm probably going to be also on the Peace and Solitude team, which I've done in the past. And that's a combination of Solitude wool and I think Peace Weavers. And it's kind of a combination of a fan group and a local group. So they do some local get-togethers where in Loudoun County, Virginia, where they'll all spin together, bring their wheels and work together. A couple of times during the tour, but you can also just participate on the Ravelry group through them. And I don't think they have any particular rules about what you can and can't spin. And then I might join like the Acreworks team, and they produce bobbins, or the Hanson Crafts team. Hanson Crafts makes these spinning wheels. It's an electric spinning wheel. And Hanson Crafts is kind of an interesting team because they want to see you post not only about your spinning, but about you getting out and about and maybe taking a walk or something like that. So they want to see those pictures as well, which is I think an interesting twist, right? It's too easy in a thing like this to just sit and spin all day long. And in order to, maybe hit a quantity goal, and then you're not getting any exercise. So I always thought that was a neat concept. Anyway, so in kind of getting myself back into that frame of mind, I've been working on some of my spinning projects that have been sitting around neglected for the last several months. I think the last time I was regularly spinning was December, actually. It's that bad. And I might have done a few minutes here and there, but nothing of any consequence. And so in the last week, I've worked on this fiber. This bobbin was actually already done, but I've been, hold on to your seats there, kids. Can you see? There we go. There we go, and some lighting. So I've been working on this wheel, and this this is a 4-ounce braid of, I think it's a Dorset from Homespun, and I've spun almost the entire second half onto this new bobbin. The wheel that you're looking at here is my Clemes Modern by Clemes and Clemes. This is not going to win any beauty contests. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's not the prettiest wheel around, and mine even more so. It's got a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on here, but it has a story. So first of all, although the wheel isn't the most elegant looking spinning wheel, this is a workhorse. I can spin a lot quickly on this, and it's just a no fuss wheel. It's always ready to go. It doesn't require a lot of tweaking or anything. It's just so simple to use. Very excellent for production spinning. Very excellent for thicker spinning. Although I'm not spinning this very thick, you can see it's not very thin either. But it's not thin. But I often use this to spin relatively, for me anyway, fat yarns. And it's great for that. I really love it for that. So the story behind this animal is that we actually found it at a at an estate sale, and it was a poorly neglected creature, and its parts were strewn about the house. They didn't know what it was, of course, but we were able to identify and assemble all of the pieces. So we found the base, which is essentially made of plywood and like not really 2x4s, but it's inexpensive materials. They were in the basement where it was moist, and somehow it survived that treatment. We found the maidens and the tension screw and the bobbins and the flyer strewn about the house in various forms of abuse. And which is why, incidentally, some of these pieces you can see are new. They're not stained with whatever this paste wax stuff is that they put on it. They're brand new. And we were lucky in the fact that although this wheel is not a new wheel, this particular one was, if I had to take a guess in the dark, and to be fair, I did have assistance from the Clemes guys, this particular model, or no, I shouldn't say this particular model, this particular one was probably produced in the late 70s. And they said they partially guessed that based on the type of stain that was used here was popular then. And it's not very good stuff, but anyway, it does the job. And they still make this wheel, though. And so we were able to get replacement parts for it without having to have custom ones made. Now, it still wasn't cheap to get the replacement parts, but it still comes out cheaper overall than buying a brand new wheel. The Clemes Modern wheel is not an inexpensive wheel, but if you're looking for something that's a production workhorse kind of thing that's simple to use, I would highly recommend it. I actually love this wheel. And these bobbins are pretty big too. They hold. I've gotten as much as 6 ounces on these bobbins. So anyway, we bought replacement flyer and some tension parts, a new whirl, because the one that they had looked like it had been eaten by a puppy, and I think I got 5 or 6 bobbins for it. And I had all these great intentions about how I was going to... Oops. Freebie. I had all these intentions about how I was going to stain and... or strip and stain the whole thing and make it all pretty and stuff. And then after a while, I realized I'm too lazy to do that. So I just use it as it is. Which makes it even more homely looking. But I still think it's a great wheel. Anyway, so that's your introduction to the Clemes Modern. Clemes also makes other types of spinning wheels. What else? Okay, so I've been working on a project that's on my Country Craftsman, which I didn't bring over here to show you. And I've also been working on one that's on my Morning Street wheel, which is probably not one you've heard of. There was a maker in somewhere in New England who I ordered. It's a bobbin lead castle type wheel, and I ordered that off of Etsy some years ago, so I've had it for a while. It's a nice little wheel. It has its own quirks too, and things I think it's better at than some of the other ones, but maybe we'll talk about that another time. I need a drink of tea. Okay. All right. I didn't bring over any other works in progress. Those are really the only ones that are of any significance. Hopefully the Think About the Wheel was interesting to you and not painful to listen to. All right. Dang it. I forgot to bring over, oh well. So let's talk about acquisitions and sheep and wool festivals. Okay, so as I mentioned, I've been to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival, which is of course very near where I grew up, what I consider to be my home. And I met up when I was there with my sister, Impact Red, who is jl.odell on Instagram, and my nephew, who is not on Instagram, and I can't remember his Ravelry name. And because I always go to these things with a mission, and that mission is to shop, we kind of hung out together, but then we kind of didn't because I always run off in a different direction. I probably need to wear bells or an echolocation collar or something, I don't know, a GPS collar, so people can find me because I just disappear at these things and I'm all over the place. And that's exactly what happened. But nonetheless, through the magic of cell phones, we were able to kind of keep tabs on each other and shopped all over the place, and we all bought lots of stuff, but me in particular, and this necessitated several trips back to the car. Let's see, I also met up with Spinning Laura Smoot Designs, and I got to chat with the ladies at Solitude Wool and Hobbledehoy and Marigold Jen, and I met Ninja Chickens. Have you watched the Ninja Chickens podcast? I think she's a lot of fun. And then I also got to meet Lucky Jenny of Lucky Jenny Knits podcast. That was fun. And who else? My sister ran into someone, and she got their card, but I didn't get it from her. I think who used to watch our podcast when we podcasted together, because she recognized her. Anyway, we had a lot of fun. There was a shameful amount of money spent by me, less shameful by others. You know, I had made this sweater, there's straps somewhere under my hair, with the express intent of wearing it at Maryland Sheep and Wool, because Maryland is generally hot in May. It can be cool, but it's generally warm, some shade of warm, and so I thought I would have something like this. And I had a couple other things lined up of a similar nature, and then I checked the weather, and it was just clearly getting colder and colder, and I was so mad. So I planned this trip fully expecting I was going to go to Maryland and boil winter out of my creaky little bones, and that just did not happen. I went to Maryland Sheep and Wool, and I was freezing. Freezing, I tell you. It was cold, and it was wet. And I do have a little bit of a problem with managing my body temperature when it's cold, and particularly when it's wet. And Sunday morning was particularly bad in that it was 45 degrees and it was damp and I could not feel my fingers. And this makes me even more antisocial, unfortunately. So apologies to everyone who tried to talk to me at the festival because I was grouchy and cold. And at one point, I actually had to go Sunday morning back to the car and sit in the car and let its little greenhouse nature self cook me a little bit because I was so cold. But yet, I still managed to buy 4 skeins from Miss Babs, 2 skeins from Marigold Jen, probably about 7 braids of hand-dyed fiber from Hobbledehoy, some washed fleece of some crossbreed thing or another from Feederbrook Farm, 2 4-ounce blends from Shucks, what's his name? Hobbyist, Homestead Hobbyist. I'm so sorry. That was a new vendor to me. He's been there a couple of years, but I hadn't shopped his booth before, I think. And I did this year specifically because of the fact that we share a common friend, and that's Al of Al's Orchid Greenhouse in Leesburg, Virginia. And Al said, go see his booth. And I said, whoa, other orchid people who are also creepy about fiber. And so I met him and we chatted for a bit, and that was kind of funny actually, because as I was standing there, another one of these people I know from Al's place came by the booth. And I thought, wow, it's like a little club here. Anyway, his booth was kind of fun actually, because of the fact that there was a guy in a blow-up dinosaur costume sitting in front of it on Saturday spinning, and then the same guy was out there knitting from his handspun the next day, and that got lots and lots of attention. You may have seen pictures of that on Instagram. There was also a thing with dinosaurs over by the Cooperative Press tent, where they, in a mud puddle, arranged some little plastic dinosaurs, and they got rearranged as the day went on, and lots of people taking pictures, and that was a great source of entertainment too. What else? Oh, I also descended upon the Solitude Wool booth, of course, as I always do. Got some braids from Into the World, and I also managed to come away with 3 fleeces. There was another skein of yarn too. I don't remember who I got that from. And I petted many, 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 many other things. There was lots of fun things to see too. The skein and garment competition was interesting as usual. One of the most interesting things to me is the increase in fiber arts other than knitting and weaving and handspun that have been slowly making a name for themselves in the skein and garment competition at Maryland Sheep and Wool. And this year I noticed there was a lot more of felted objects, and some of them are quite elaborate and very interesting to see. One in particular that I keep thinking of was essentially a ram skull, felted, life size, like, I don't know, it was bigger. It was big, and it looked fairly solid, but you know, of course you don't touch it, so I don't know how solid it actually was, but it was solid enough that it was holding its shape very well, and for its size. And there was some rug hooking, a few different types of felting. I'm trying to remember what all there was. And of course the interesting yarns and everything. So always worth checking out if you ever go to any festival. But I think the skein and garment competition at the Maryland Festival is one of the best. Even Rhinebeck, which is equally, at least equally as large as Maryland Sheep and Wool, it does not compare, in my opinion, to the quantity and quality of stuff that you see at Maryland. Anyway, that plug for my home stayed aside. Let's take a look at some of the things I got. Let me check the time. Wow, 45 minutes. Okay, I'm talking a lot. All right. So the theme of this year's festival was Romney. And if I had read the program, I might be able to tell you what that amounts to in terms of having a theme to the festival. But as I already stated, it's my mission in life to buy all the things. So I didn't. So let's take a look at some of the things that I bought that were Romney. I actually got 4 of these. There's another of the natural color. So this is a natural kind of gray-brown shade. This one is a not blue, actually dark teal shade. And this is a claret, deep red-purple kind of shade. And these are, of course, Romney from Solitude Wool. And since Romney was the theme of the festival, the theme breed of the festival this year, Solitude Wool had their Romney stuff on discount, I think 15% off of the marked price, which is pretty sweet. But anyway, this is a Romney yarn. And it is kind of bulky. So I have 4 of them, and I had 3 already, but they're completely different colors. So I don't quite know what I'll do with them, but I might be able to get a sweater out of these 4, or at least a vest if I'm creative about it. And you know, it's a very nice huggable yarn. Romney is not the softest breed in the world, but it's also not the coarsest either. And some of them can be pretty soft, actually. Especially if they're younger or if they're spun in such a way that you don't strangle the fibers. And what you're looking at here, it doesn't strangle the fibers. It gives the fibers room to relax. And so it gives it a softer hand. And if you were to take this and condition it, remember last time we talked about how you condition the fibers or you get the edge, that will make it even that much more pleasant. So well worth a sweater, but this could also be fabulous on a triangle loom, so I might do that as well. So I got those, and also from the Solitude Wool booth, I got some a full pound of cochineal dyed fleece. Let's see if we can find a lock in here. Now, this feels soft to me. It's smooth soft, not like marshmallow soft, but it's smooth. I'm pulling it out a little bit there, but so you can see how it has kind of a big crimp on it, and it does have a fairly long staple length. So fiber like this can be combed, or you can card it and make a very lofty yarn out of it. Or this is pretty good quality fiber, so you could just kind of tease it and either, you know, kind of spin from the lock. We do a little spinning demonstration there, so you can kind of just loosen it up and spin it. And that would be spinning from the lock. And you can get quite fine with it, as you can see. Anyway, and any of those things would work. So there's quite a lot that you can do with a pound. I know that I can certainly get a sweater out of a pound. I am a bit small, though, to be fair. And I wouldn't be able to get a sweater with a hood on it out of a pound, but regular pullover, definitely a pound is plenty. Depending upon how you spin it, I guess. Anyway, so that was lovely stuff, and you know, it's cochineal. Yeah, I love it when they grind up the bugs and make dye. From Into the World, and to be fair, that wasn't all that I got from Solitude Wool. That's just all that I bought in. No, it's not. I'll show you one more thing in a minute. I'm going to talk about Romney first. So from Into the World, I got a number of braids. And the one I brought in here to show you is also Romney. So they have some Romney top. One of the nice things about Romney is the way that it takes dye. Let me take that out of the package so you can see it a little better. like some other kinds of, I think Romney is classed as a long wool, but like some other kinds of long wool, look at that. Look at the saturation on that. There we go. You can see it really well. It's not very shiny, but it's also not matte. It has enough shine on it and the ability to really take dye in well that you can get some really beautiful saturated colors with it. So that's a 4-ounce braid, and you know, perhaps I'll spin that and weave something out of it. I could see that being really beautiful woven. Let's see. You could do a cowl with it, I think. This isn't the softest Romney I've ever encountered, but it's soft enough. I think you could do, you know, something around the neck, or and definitely a hat, and would probably make pretty good socks. Actually, should be fairly durable stuff. The thing about long wools is they are fairly durable. All right, let's check that in there. So let me chuck this in this bag. Clearing the deck a little bit. I did also get a Romney fleece at the New Hampshire show, which I'll show you in a minute. I'll talk about all the fleeces at once. But before I do that, let me show you this Dorset. I have to show you the Dorset. This is, Solitude has a new Dorset yarn, and it's probably got, excuse me, oh, it's 20% nylon. So 80% Dorset, 20% nylon, which relaxes it a little bit. Again, Dorset is a down wool kind of sheep, and it tends to have a lot of bounce, but the addition of that nylon does a couple of things for it. One, it relaxes the fiber a little bit because it's not 100% down wool anymore, and but it still has a certain amount of loft and bounce to it. In theory, it makes it more durable as a sock yarn. And the other thing about it is that it makes it more washable. So down wools are resistant to shrinkage to start with. You add some nylon, it's going to make it more resistant to shrinkage, just because it's not 100% wool anymore. And they say on here that if you knit this tightly, as you would for socks, and you can get away with machine wash and dry, or dry flat. Excuse me. Oh, this yammering is too much for me. Anyway, I had to buy this for 2 reasons. 2 decent reasons. Number one, the color was really fun. And one of the ladies was working on I think it was Sue. One of them was working on a sample of this yarn in this color, and it looked really neat, knitted up, and it looked like, I didn't pull out her sample, but it looked like she was doing a triangular shawl, and it looked like it was going to be a lot of fun when it was done, so I wanted to try a skein of it. And second of all, I wanted it because this is really buttery for a Dorset yarn. You know, Dorset has a little bit of a tooth to it because it is a down wool and it's not the finest of down wools. So it feels woolly. But this has kind of a smooth, buttery feel to it. So I think that if you wash this and again condition it a little bit, it'll really bring that out, and it'll be just delightful to touch. It is different from, say a handspun merino, right? It's not that kind of a buttery, but it has a wonderful texture for Dorset, and I would really recommend giving it a try. They did create it specifically with the idea of it being a boot sock yarn. It is a little bit on the thick side, so I think it's they're calling it a sport. You might even, depending upon how you knit, you get away with using kind of a DK gauge on it. But there is a sock pattern specifically for this yarn out, I think by Evelyn Clark, but don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. And I think it's called the Dorset boot sock or something like that. Anyway, so a lovely thing to try. They just released this yarn, and I think they have it on their website now if you were interested in giving it a try. All right, so let's move on, and I'll show you a couple of fleeces, and then that'll be it for today. Let me get a drink. Ugh. Sorry. My glasses are also greasy, so I don't know how you can, I can't see anything. All right. Since this is getting a bit long, I'm going to cut down and only show you a couple of the fleeces. I ended up getting a total of 6 fleeces between New Hampshire and Maryland Sheep and Wool, because both places have a number of really excellent resources in terms of what populates, well, actually, all of these came from booths. I didn't buy anything from the sheep and the fleece shows. At Maryland, I felt that a lot of them were overpriced. Sorry, but I do. At New Hampshire, I didn't actually look at it this year. So, because of the fact that I know that some of the vendors have some very nice things, so I just shopped from the vendors directly. So, on the theme of Romney, let's look at this fleece that I got at the New Hampshire show. This is Romney lamb, and you'll see that this, can you see that crimp on there, is a little bit smaller than what I was showing you before. Now some of that could be, you know, animal to animal variation, and some of it could just be that this is a young sheep. And I want to call your attention to the fact that it almost looks like a little bit closer crimp on this end and a little bit more open on this end. So I would bet you, not a lot, but I would bet you that next year this animal's fleece will be a little bit more open and have a slightly bigger crimp. And unfortunately, this is a recycled card, so it doesn't have the vendor's name on it, but in any case, a lovely fleece that I got at the New Hampshire Sheep and Wool Sheep Festival. It is varying shades of gray. It's not all identical to that color. If you've never worked with a fleece before, that's one of the fun things about working with a raw fleece, is that they can have beautiful colors, and you can get a little bit of variation in color across the fleece. And if you wanted to, you can grade a fleece according to both texture and color, or one or the other, or you can just blend it all together and get a lovely heathered effect. This other fleece that I want to show you is a Coopworth lamb. And you'll see that's really long. So that came from this vendor. You can see it is located in Vermont. Sorry, I can't read. And this is also a lamb. And again, this is pretty close crimp. But if you were to look at her other fleeces from adult sheep, you would see much more open crimp. And the fibers are also usually a little bit more coarse on older animals. So they're useful in different ways. Interesting point of fact, Coopworth sheep were developed from Romney and blue-faced Leicester. So if you were looking at that and thinking blue-faced Leicester, that's why. There is some of that genetics in its history. And they can be variable. Some Coopworth, to me, ironically, I think Coopworth fleece, adult Coopworth fleece anyway, is a little bit more coarse than Romney, in fact, which seems like it would go the opposite direction given that its other parentage comes out of blue-faced Leicester, which tends to have a nice hand to it. But I find them a little bit more coarse. It's still suitable for, like outerwear, coats, sweaters, especially, I would say not something close to your neck. And certainly socks and, maybe rugs and things like that. Mittens. Yeah. Things not next to your neck. But with a lamb fleece, it's going to be soft, and it is much more soft. And so I'll have a lot more options with this, and what to do with it. And that is just really long. that fleece, if I'm careful with the washing and I keep the locks in relatively good order, I will spin that from the lock just by pulling out pieces, just like taking a cat brush, flip card combing, or whatever it's called, to the ends. And you just do that by twisting it so they don't come out in the middle, and then just brush, 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 and they're ready to go. And I've spun that way before. It's very satisfying. It's also quick. It cuts down on the traffic. All right, I'll show you the other fleeces real quick, but I'm not really going to talk about them very much. This is 2 locks out of a Jacob sheep. That's the name of the sheep there. That came from the New Hampshire show. That particular vendor, I've bought fleece from them before. They always have very, very pretty things. And that is, by the way, a little bit on the long side for Jacob, but I think they've kind of developed their stock for that. And then I have here this is a crossbred Tunis by Border Leicester. And this is a pretty, can you see that at all? It helps if I put my fingers behind it, not in front of it. Genius. Here. Thick. It's fine fiber. And again, it's fairly long, probably from the Border Leicester. And this comes from someone at Maryland Sheep and Wool, who I'm very fond of, but she actually lives in Massachusetts, not very far from me, or from where I live now. And then finally at Maryland, I was able to score 2 Wison fleeces. And if you've never heard of that breed, it's because it's pretty uncommon, especially in the US. This is one of these kind of island landrace kind of sheep breeds. In some ways similar to a Shetland or a Soay, and they're tiny little sheep. I think, so what I read in the Fleece and Fiber source book is that they are actually smaller generally than Soay sheep, standing about 20 inches at the shoulder. Just think about that for a minute. 20 inches is not that tall. So these fleeces are about a pound and a half. They're not big. I couldn't pass them up because when am I ever going to see that again? So I bought 2 fleeces, and they're soft. They look like Shetland fleeces, and they're annoyingly mildly cotted at the ends like some Shetland fleeces. And you can see this one is double coated. You see that's a hair. That's the second coat coming out there. And then we have down. So this one's double coated a little bit. This one I don't think is, or if it is, the coat fibers are just kind of fine and blending in. They're not very noticeable. So I'm going to assume that this is going to be an experience similar to Shetland, but just a little bit different. And so I got that just for the joy of trying it. I don't think there's very many breeders of these things in the US. Anyway, so I think that's plenty for today. I've talked your ear off for an entire hour. Thank you for sticking with me to the end if you did. I really appreciate that you listened to my rambling. And I hope you find it interesting. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you about what kinds of things you like hearing and what kinds of things did you find not helpful. Again, you can find me on Ravelry as Sapphire Child. You can leave a comment on the blog at droppedstitchespodcast.blogspot.com, or you can leave a comment here on YouTube if you're watching the video there. And you can also find me on Instagram as julia.redman. So, yeah, I think that's plenty. Have a great week.